everyone, I'm Allie here with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you today how to do a bezel set Rivoli that we're going to decorate with some O beads and create a little bit of a backing for with those. And we're going to be using a couple different materials. For the example here that I've already finished, I've used size 15 O galvanized silver. I've used the mixed metallic bronze in the Delicas in the 11O. And then I've used the Peridot AB O beads. For my example that I'm going to be making here, I'm using the Topaz color in the Rivoli, and it is a 14mm Rivoli. I'm going to use the newest O bead color that we got. It's called Crystal Sliperit, and it's a pretty combination of kind of purple, pink, and peaches. I'm going to be using the same 11O, or the same 11O Delica bead, and that's that mixed metallic color. And then I'm going to be using the silver-lined crystal in the 15O seed beads. Other than beads, you're going to need some thread and a needle. Thread-wise, I'm using 0.006 WildFire beading thread, and you're only actually going to use about 3 feet of this, so you don't use a ton of thread. We're going to be using a size 10 English beading needle, and then I have my thread burner that's going to kind of keep it all together. We will build a little pendant bail for this so you can wear it as a pendant. You could make it into a ring though, also be kind of a statement piece as a ring, or you could make it into the center of a bracelet. So there's a lot of different uses for it, and you can kind of change up beads, but it's going to be showing you how to embellish around that. So to get started, I'm actually going to be starting just with my Delica beads, and I'm going to be making the casing to go around my crystal here. And I'm going to start by using that 3 feet of thread, and I put a stop bead on. I'm just using a silver 11O stop bead. And the sides of this, the whole thing is going to be peyote, but when we get around the sides and to do the casing, I like to start out so there's not a lot of tension with actually a brick stitch, and you're going to be doing brick stitch kind of back and forth to create your peyote baseline. You're going to put 2 beads onto your needle and let them drop down to your stop bead. I'm going to go back through my needle coming away from my stop bead, back through my first 11O Delica. What that's going to do is that's going to lay those 2 beads right next to one another, and that's going to create the start of my brick stitch here. So it's getting a little bit of a ladder start, then we're going to do the brick stitch. To do that, I'm going to do 2 beads on at once. I'm going to grab on to my thread that's in between my beads, that bridge thread. Then I'm going to come back up through the second Delica that I added, away from the project and away from the stop bead. When I pull that tightly, then you're going to look and see the start of that stitch there, that brick stitch. Again, after this, 2 beads go on. You're going to grab that center bridge thread there, right between. Pull the thread the whole way through, and take your needle and thread, making sure you're still going underneath that bridge thread. And you're going to go back through that second bead that you added. I like to flip it in my hand as I work with it. I find that's easier to keep track of where you're going. What you do want to make sure when you're doing this is, because you're going to be working peyote off either side of it, is you want to make sure that it's going side by side here. So you can see that you have 2 up, 2 down, 2 up. The next ones you do, you want to make sure that they are 2 down. So you're going to put on 2 beads. Grab that bridge thread. Go back up through the second bead that you put on. Again, I like to turn it in my hand as I'm working on it. And you've got that next one on there. I'm going to continue doing this brick stitch back and forth till I get to the circumference of whatever I'm working on. So even though I'm doing a Rivoli pendant here, you don't have to do that. Or if you're doing a different size Rivoli pendant, you're just going to have to see how many actual stitches to add. But I'm going to work it the length of the circumference of my pendant, doing this brick stitch just 2 wide, back and forth. If you are doing the same size Rivoli, and the Preciosa one here again is 14mm, you are going to have 33 passes of this brick stitch. You want to make sure that you end on an odd count. And I'm just continuing to build, always taking my needle back up through and making sure I'm going back up through this in the second bead that I added. If I go to the first, I'm going to mix up that kind of every other line that I want to do, getting the nice stagger. So I have my strip here, and all I'm going to do to bring it around in a circle, which is going to take that circle shape to go around my pendant there, my little Rivoli. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take my last one that I've done, my thread's coming out, and I'm going to grab that bridge thread that we created with our very first beads when we made the ladder stitch. I'm going to take my thread on my needle then, back down through the same bead that I was coming out of. Pull that nice and tight. And then you're going to get that semi-seamless line that you wanted to create. This is actually the first 2 rows of peyote. And all I'm going to do now is continue on with my peyote stitch. To do that, I'm going to take my threaded needle up through one of the outside beads. I'm going to get ready to go with my peyote stitch. I'm going to do 1 stitch around with my 11 O's, and then I'm going to switch to my 15s. Peyote, if you don't know it, you can stop this video and kind of gather your train of thought, watch some other videos. But all we're doing is we're adding a bead, and then we're sewing through the next bead that's sticking up in my line here. Again, I'm going to add a bead, sew through the next one sticking up. Add a bead. So you're going to go the whole way around this circle, doing that as well. So I'm going the whole line right down, adding a bead onto my needle, and then sewing through the next bead sticking up. And I'm going to do this the whole circle around my project. So I'm about to finish up my circle, and you can see I have a little gap in there yet. That's how you know that you're going to be finished. Also, because your next bead you go through, there's already a bead in place. To finish this circular peyote, I'm going to go through that last bead that I need to go to fill in that empty space, and then to do a step up, I'm going to go through the first Delica bead that I put on at the start of this row. After this, then I'm going to jump in and use some of my 11 OC beads, or my 15 OC beads, and I'm going to make that little bezel set area so that way it hugs together and it gets around my Rivoli. To put the 15 O's on, I'm just going to continue my stitch, putting on my 15 O's in place of my 11s. So where my 11s would be, I'm putting the 15 O's in their place. What that's going to do, because this is a smaller bead, is it's going to pull it in nice and tight, and it's going to get it so that it is smaller, so that way your pendant's not going to fall out. That's how we're going to kind of sandwich it in there and hold it in there. I'm going to do 1 full rotation with these, and as I'm threading these on, I want to make sure to give a nice tight pull after each pass, because that is going to tighten it up a little bit. Rivolis have a very, very narrow side to them. They don't have a very deep side. Other beads you might need to do more passes before you start adding your 15 O's on. But the nice thing with a Rivoli, you only really need to do 3 to 4 peyote rows before you start with your 11 Delicas, before you start doing your 15 O's. You can also use regular 11 O's rather than Delicas. I just really like the nice tight fit that Delicas create. And this is kind of the ideal thing that they were created for. So when you're using them, this is really what they were created for. This and bead embroidery, to have that perfect fit and to be able to sew back through multiple times. This is also a nice way if you are doing a ring or something to seam up the sides. You just use a little bit of a smaller bead to kind of take the place of the bigger beads, and it creates a little bit of a line for you. So you could even make this into a ring. So here I am to do my last pass here. I have that little blank space right there. I'm going to go through that the 11-0 that I started with. And then at the same time, I'm also going to go through one of my 15-0s. So it's the first 15-0 that I put on. And my needle's coming out that 15-0. Give a nice yank after that, and you can see it's already starting to take a little bit of its shape. It's not as wide as the other side. And then what I'm going to do is add another row of my 15-0s onto it. So you're just going to put your 15-0s on and continue right along your line. So as I continue to go around, you want to make sure that you pull rather tightly as you're going around, because as you're going around these little 15s, what that's going to do is really pull that in together. You can see how much more curvature this is having here than the start of it. And we're going to continue around the whole way with the 15s. We're going to repeat this as well in the front, that we're doing 2 rows. It's up to you how many rows you want to do of the 15s. I prefer to do 2. 2 is usually the minimum that I do. I just like the way that that pulls in, and then it doesn't take over your crystal. If you use the crystal color as well, like I'm doing the silver lined crystal, it doesn't take over the color also of your whole project. So it just gives a nice little look. You can also match it to your project that you could use. I could have used a little bit of a topazy color, since my Preciosa Rivoli is a topaz color. And I'm going the whole way around with my 15-0s sewing through. Some people, when they use 15-0s, will also like to use a size 12 English beading needle. I avoid that at all costs. I don't like how flimsy a size 12 is. So I try to push through and use a size 10 as much as possible. There are some projects where when you're working with 15s, you really do need to go back through them multiple times, so a 12 will be much better to use. But in the case of this, where you just have at max 2 strands going through your 15, you can just keep it as is. If you do happen to have a 15 that has a really, really galvanized color or a very deep lined color, you may need to switch to the 12 to get in there. So I've made it the whole way around, and what you want to do now is actually put your little Rivoli in. This tail, you want to make sure comes to the front. You don't want that tucked to the back where it's going to actually get caught in your Rivoli. So you're going to just pop that crystal right in there, and it should fit very, very nicely, nice and snug. And you can see on the back right there your size 15s. Once the Rivoli is in, I keep it in and I work with it inside. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to snake back along my line. So I don't want to see any of my thread. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my Delica here, right next to my 15, and I'm actually going to work my way back right along the line here, going back right along the side. So when I pull my thread, it's going to go between those pieces. And what I want to do is I want to get to the front of my briolette. So I'm getting to the front here. And once I get to the front, then we're going to add the 15s right around the front corner, just like we did with the 15s in the back. And that's going to kind of hug it together. Now that I'm at the front, I'm going to go around and do the 15-0s here in the front as well. What you do want to make sure, like I said, is that tail's kind of out of the way. You don't want it to get wrapped into your project. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm coming out one of my upper beads, just like I am here. So I'm coming out one of the beads that it's on the upper level. And then I'm going to continue with my 15-0s. So on the back we did a row of peyote. On the front we don't even have to worry about the row of Delica peyotes. We're going right into the 15-0s. You're going to skip over that tail. We'll pick up that tail later. But you're just going to continue on doing your 11-0s between your Delica, or your 15-0s between your Delicas, and doing a row of peyote with the 15 O's. We're going to do 2 rows, just like we did with the back, with the 15 O's, and that's really going to hold that Rivoli right in place. So I've made it the whole way around the front of the Rivoli, doing 2 rows of peyote, and I'm coming out one of my 15 O's, the last one that I had to go through. And what I'm going to do is actually take my needle and thread, and I'm going to go back through the 11O Delica right below it. And again, that's going to be to hide my thread. And I'm going to go back on an angle so that I'm coming out on the top row. So when you're counting peyote, you're going back through 2 of your 11 Delicas. The first one that sits the closest to the 11s, and then the next one that sits a little bit back. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to continue peyote. So when you're continuing peyote here, that's going to make my little ridge here that I can sit my O's on. You can go back 1 more row if you want to. It's kind of up to you. I will go back 1 more row, and what that's going to do is that's going to take me right to the middle. So if you're looking at your Delicas, you have 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, right along the ridge. What you want to do is you want to go back so you're on one of those 3 beads. What you're going to do is actually continue with your peyote, picking up your Delicas and sewing right along the line, going through every row that has one of those 3rd beads. Pull tight and it's going to pop that bead right to the side. You're just going to continue right along your row. Again, always going through that middle 3rd bead row, skipping the 2 row. And that's going to create peyote on the side as well. The nice thing with peyote is you can always create peyote off of it, even if it's circular peyote like this. And you're going to continue right along your row, doing a nice little, it almost starts to look like a little sunburst here, that you're doing those peyotes. And I'm going to go the whole way around, picking up that 3rd bead and sewing a bead in between. So I'm getting ready to do my last bead in this rotation, and I'm going to put the Delica on, go through my last 3rd bead, and at the same time I'm going to go through my first bead that I put on as I was doing this roundabout row. So I'm putting on that first bead and giving a little nice tight pull, and that's making that first little rotation here of my little sunburst right around my cab. So when you're looking at that, you're going to have almost, it looks like a little gear or a little sunburst. I'm going to do another row of my Delicas. This time when I'm doing the row, every 3rd Delica, I'm going to put 2 in its place. Because it's expanding and getting bigger, it's going to need a little extra space between it. So I'm going to put on 1 Delica in the space, and then you can see it moves around a little bit. It has a little bit of give to it. So I'm going to put another one in place. And then this 3rd one here, to hold it nice and in place, I'm going to put 2 Delicas. And pop those in, and they'll fit really, really nicely. You just need to keep track as you're going around then. You're doing 1, 2, and then on your 3rd rotation, you're going to pop in 2 Delicas. Depending on how tight you pull, it might be every 4. You might only need to do it every couple. If it's a little bit looser, you might need to do it more often. But I usually do about every 3. And that kind of covers that up nicely. And that's creating our ridge, so that way we can sit our O's right in that ridge. And you can tell as you're going around whether or not you need the 2 or not. I just did 2, 3, and now I'm going to do my 4th one with 2. So you're just kind of filling in that gap on the peyote. And that's going to fill it in nicely, so that way you have a nice flat, even surface. Otherwise what happens is it starts to turn and kind of wafer. You're just going the whole way around, back to your starting area. Again, I just did 3, and then I'm going to pick up 2 on my 4th. Pop that in there. And then I'm going to do My last rotations are all going to be ones. Move that tail out of the way. One here. One more. And then one more to fill in my gap. I'm going to go through then that first Delica bead that I added in this row, just as if I'm getting ready to step up and do another row of my peyote. Once you're through there and you're ready to start your next row of peyote, we're actually going to start with our O beads, and I'll show you how to do those. Sorry, I'm not thinking actually. Before we do our O beads, we need to do a third rotation. That's my fault. In some places, you will need to do 2 more so than 1. Anytime that you have a space where you have 2 beads that you added on the previous row, you're going to go through both of those 2 beads. 1, you can add 1. Every once in a while you'll need to add 2 in the place. And that's because your peyote is getting bigger because it's going out further. So it needs kind of more room to expand. And I'm going right along my peyote row. And then again, if you did have 2 beads in the lower one, you want to go through both beads at once. It's almost like a 2-drop peyote. And I'm going the whole way around, either putting 1 or 2 beads, just to get my surface there, that it's nice. And if you see a little gap like that, you actually want to go back. I'm going to add another bead in that place, because I don't want that gapping to happen. I don't want to see any of my thread. That's better. I'm going to continue around, the whole way around my circle, and then this is going to get me that flat surface that I need to put my O beads on. And the O beads then will sit right on top of this little ridge that I'm creating. I'm going to continue going around creating this little ridge. So once you're done doing your little sunburst here and your little extra peyote on the sides, what you want to do is go back and have your needle coming out so that it's coming out your original peyote line that you added to the outside. So the one that you added in between with 3 of the base. And you want your needle and thread coming out right in that position. At this point, we're going to pick up our O's and our 15 O's. You're going to put an O on, and then a 15 is going to sit right on top of it, and that's what's going to hold it in place. I'm going to then sew back through my O and right along my peyote line. So I'm going to move my O out of the way, but I do like to keep the O usually right next to my project. And I'm going to sew right along that original peyote line. And when I pull tightly then, that O is just going to sit right there, right in place. When I'm coming out the next bead, just like I am here, again my O goes on, my 15 O goes on, and then I'm going to go back through my O and back through my next bead in that original, peyote line. So go back through that original bead. Pulling nice and tight, and that's just going to keep that one right there, right next to. The tighter you pull, the nicer those O's will sit right in a line. And I'm just going to continue with my design. And if you do have a Sliperit O like this, it does have 2 different colors, so I'm making sure that I'm picking up every time so that my more colorful side rather than my copper side sits on the top. Pulling nice and tight, and there you go, you have it again right around there. It's almost a perfect fit between those peyote rows. It does get a tiny bit crowded, but overall it's pretty darn close to a perfect fit. Again, an O goes on, a 15 that's going to hold it in place, and then I'm sewing back through the O and through that next bead in my peyote line. And right out. And that's going to sit the O's again right on top of my peyote so that they sit right in next to my Rivoli and that they frame it out. I'm going to continue doing that the whole way along my Rivoli. So just sewing as I'm moving along, putting those O's in place. You're getting a nice look with those O's kind of decorating and making the Rivoli look a little bit bigger too. Kind of expands it. I like the play of the colors too, of these pinky purples with the different colors of beads. It looks nice with the topaz. You can see here they kind of fit perfectly, those O's. And I continue building right along, putting the O's right in their place and going right along my Rivoli. Now you have about 3 more to go. So I've gone through my whole Rivoli now, and I have it framed out with my O beads. And what I'm going to do now is create a bail. At this point, if you want to, you can even build more peyote on the outside, make it bigger, add more O's. I'm going to keep it the way that it is. It's a nice little focal piece. Again, you could do it as a ring. You could do it as the middle of a bracelet here. You could do it also as a pendant, which is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to show you how to do a little bail on the pendant so that way it sits nice into the front and the pendant doesn't actually take away from the project, but it still has a nice bail that you can see here, that you're not going to get too much of it in the front and center. My needle just finished going through my last O, and to do that pendant we're going to go back through my peyote. Oops, caught on an O there. We're going back through my peyote. Really wants to attach to that O. Going back through the peyote so that way your thread and needle are coming out one of the top portions of your peyote. So it's coming out right at the very, very top here of this top bead that we went through for the peyote. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a number of beads of the Delica beads to my project, and this is going to be the amount of beads that I want for my bail. So however many beads I want to attach to my bail, I'm going to use that now. I'm going to take a couple off because I don't want it quite this big. Once you have the appropriate number on, you're going to go straight back from that bead back to one of your 11 O beads right at the back. You're going to sew through that, or I'm sorry, your 15 O beads, and see that's going to create that little loop. When I come out of that bead, I'm going to add one more of my Delica beads, and then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start peyote. So I'm going to pick up the second bead along that peyote line, or that original line that I created. Get that tail out of the way. And give a nice tight pull, and it's going to create peyote right along the edge. So again, another bead goes on, go skip a bead, go through the next bead. And it's going to want to pull up, you just kind of have to pull down as you're working on it. Skip a bead, go through the next bead. And this will help also round out that bail, so that way it's not turning too much to one side or the other when you wear it. You just want to make sure as you're pulling that that peyote stays to the side and doesn't want to pop up. When you get back to the front, you can see I have room for one more bead. I'm just going to catch that original bead that I was coming out of and sew through it. That adds my last bead to my peyote row. And that has my little peyote row. I'm going to do one more row of the peyote on each side, but this time what I'm going to do my peyote row is I'm actually going to be going and adding my 15s on the side. So to start, I'm going to sew back through one of my side beads here and come out. And I'm going to add my 15s just to decorate up the sides a little bit. And they're going to sit right in place as well. You're going to go right along that peyote line, just adding the 15s right along the side. I'm going to add the 15s along to the right side and the left side of this peyote loop. Sewing right down along. You can see that's kind of decorating up the loop, just the tiniest of bit. So once you're finished adding your 15 O's and you go the whole way around the bail portion, what you're going to do is bring your needle and thread to the portion where you have your original starter thread. So I'm going to sew back through my project, just down the sides, and again I'm always sewing along the peyote line, so that way I don't have any of my thread showing. And I'm just going to sew right along the line the whole way again until I get back to that thread starting spot, and they're going to meet then. Once you're at the spot where they're touching, all you're going to do is take your needle off one end and take your stop bead off the other end, or just push it down. I'm going to take these two thread ends and I'm just going to tie those together. And I want to tie them to the back, so you make sure that it's behind one of your O's, so that way you don't see a lot of it. Once you have 2 or 3 good knots in there, you can burn it down or you can glue it. It's up to you. I'm just going to burn mine down and fuse the ends as I burn. And then there you have your whole little amulet or pendant. And again, it's just using the O's to decorate the outside of that. You could also do this where you use other beads as well, but the O's give it a fun kind of look to it that you can, like I said, make it into a pendant or a ring or a bracelet. You could even make it into a pair of earrings if you wanted to do that as well. So hopefully you have a chance to play with these fun Czech glass O beads. We are selling them. Again, they're about a 2x4, a little bit off from there, and we do have them in a variety of different colors, and we're constantly increasing the amount of colors that we have as they become more and more available on the market. But this is your O bead. You can attach a necklace back there, a piece of leather, a piece of chain. It's kind of up to you what you want to hang it on. You could even hang it on a beaded portion as well. So thanks a lot for watching, and if you get a chance, check out the rest of our YouTube videos. Also visit us online at PotomacBeads.com. Check out our location page, and we'd love to see you in one of our physical locations so you can make some of these beautiful YouTube pieces or take a class from our knowledgeable staff there. If you can't get the materials and you don't live near one of our stores, you can go to thebeadco.com and we can help you out there. Thanks a lot for watching, and enjoy making this Rivoli and Super Duo bezel set pendant.